What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today's video, we're gonna be talking about Marauders number 16 by Jerry Duggan and Stefano Caselli. And in this video, we're finally gonna see Sebastian Shaw finally get his comeuppance. He is finally about to get those cheeks turned sideways, smack it, flip it, rub it down, everything, and it is gonna be a thing of beauty. But is it gonna go exactly the way we want? Is revenge truly a dish best served cold? We're gonna talk about all this and more right now. But first, wash your damn hands and let's hit that intro.
Word to wise, grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple eyes. You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so when we pick up with this issue of Marauders, the thing that is immediately brought up is what Bishop found when he was examining Kate Pryde's body shortly after her death in Marauders number 6. We discovered that the vines that Bishop had found wrapped around Kate's legs in Marauders number 8, Bishop has finally brought this evidence to Storm, who still sits on the Quiet Council. And when he questions Storm about what she knows about these vines, Storm makes it very clear that she's very well aware that these are Krakoan vines, that they are fast growing, and that the Black King, Sebastian Shaw, is at the root of the problem. You see, the thing I like about this comic is that we don't really spend any time him and Han about, Kate and Emma trying to convince anyone that Shaw did what he did. It's one of those situations where it's pretty much obvious to anyone that is sitting in the room that Shaw did something shady. So when Kate and Emma both pull up to Hellfire Bay and start beating the brakes off Sebastian Shaw, it would come as a surprise to no one. Not only do they gate crash his little whiskey sipping time, but they also rob him of his mutant powers using a device that may or may not be related to the one that Forge originally created under orders of Henry Gyrick for the National Security Council. This could be very much the same thing. For those of you who are familiar with the character of Sebastian Shaw, they kind of had to do this because he thrives on kinetic energy. He literally calls himself the master of it because he can literally take any kinetic energy that is directed at him and use it to empower himself. I remember stories back in the day of reading X-Men comics where they would say that he literally would wake up in the morning and have servants beat the crap out of him just so he could absorb kinetic energy and have it stored for a later point in the day should he need it in an emergency. Now, what they're going to do is they have come to wreck his place because they want him to openly admit to what he did, and more importantly, they also want him to agree to a deal. Because at the end of it all, Emma knows everything that he's done thanks to Kate and Lockheed. They know that he sold drugs, Krakoan drugs, to the Verendi, which we know they did in turn tanked those drugs and try and use them to undermine Krakoa's newfound place in the world now that they have these miracle drugs that have earned them sovereignty as a nation. No matter how hard Sebastian Shaw tries to fight without his mutant powers, how much he tries to stop them from destroying all of his various liquors that he's accrued throughout the years, what they're going to offer him is a deal. They could either A, out him to the Quiet Council and basically ensure that he becomes exiled and thrown in the hole with Sabretooth, or they can keep this all behind closed doors, make sure this is Hellfire Trading Company business. Specifically, no one else knows what happens. And who knows? He may or may not survive it. The one thing I wasn't expecting was how Sebastian Shaw was going to try and spin his actions towards Kate and try and make it sound like he did this for the good of Krakoa. Trying to say that, oh, I only did this because you offered power, Hellfire Trading Club power, to a woman who we didn't know whether or not she was or was not a mutant. Now, this is regarding the idea that A, all the old theories about Kate Pryde and how, oh, she was a Neo, or she was an external, or maybe she was a Skrull, or she was some kind of other imposter, that she was the person that was alluded to in the Hunt for Wolverine series when Iron Man revealed that there was a sleeper agent among the mutants at Xavier's school. And more importantly, the idea that she couldn't use the Krakoan gates, trying to make it seem as though that must have meant she may not really be a mutant. Now, this to me, honestly, is all lip service because we actually know that he never thought that. He wanted power for power's sake. He didn't like the way that Emma cucked him when they brought back the Hellfire Club in the form of the Hellfire Trading Company, and he wanted his ultimate power back at the head of said table. He didn't want this power residing in the hands of Emma Frost. This has nothing to do with Kate Pryde and whether or not she is or is not a mutant. He knows that she's a mutant. He even tells her as much when he kills her, saying that he knows she can't use the gates because it's a quirk of her mutant power. This had nothing to do with whether or not he thought that this was, for the good of, mutant kind to keep a possible not mutant at arm's length. This had nothing to do with it. He's just trying to save his own skin. One of the things I do also like about this comic is how many times the idea of him being a pillow for Sabretooth and being in the hole are referenced in this comic, and more importantly, my favorite part, the fact that when he calls her Kitty, that Emma slaps the bejesus out of him and demands he call her by the name she prefers to be called. It's one of those things I always hated when my relatives would, continue calling me by some pet nickname that I haven't gone by in like since I was a kid. Shaw tries to make it seem like, oh, I proved that you were a mutant, and oh, I gave you purpose, I took away your doubts by killing you, and this, that, and the third, but at the end of it all, this ain't gonna work out the way he wants it to. Because even though he's humbly asking to be forgiven, we all know that he's not humble about anything. And besides, he's not the only person who he had done wrong to. He almost killed Lockheed, and Lockheed wants his pound of flesh. And Storm wants to witness it. Storm wants to see Sebastian Shaw take the fall just as much as anyone else in the room does. Because we gotta remember that of the people in this room right now, other than Lockheed and other than Emma Frost, who else has as much history with Kate Pryde as Storm does? Now, they're not gonna let Lockheed burn Sebastian Shaw alive. They're not gonna allow him to eat his still beating heart right out of his chest, or eat his brains right out of his skull while his body is still recognizing the idea that it is coming close to its ultimate demise. No, what they're gonna do is they're gonna allow Lockheed to pluck out his eye and maim him. Something as a constant reminder of what he has done. And what they're going to do now is they're gonna allow him to live. They're not going to kill him as a lot of people thought, myself included. I thought that maybe they would kill Sebastian Shaw, or at the very least, banish him into exile alongside Sabretooth. It seems like that is a punishment that would ultimately fit the crime. However, that's not what they're gonna do. What they're gonna do is they are going to allow the Black Bishop, who is his son, Shinobi Shaw, to maintain contact and work with the countries who recognize Krakoa's sovereignty. The Red Queen will now be taking over the Black King, and by Black King I mean Sebastian Shaw. She will be taking over his side of the black market business that was Sebastian's to overlord when Krakoa became a thing. So that means that Kate now has Sebastian's old job. And what makes this even more fitting is that this isn't even entirely his punishment. His punishment is that the whiskey that they have allowed him to drink is poisoned. The same poison the Verendi used to taint the Krakoan medicines that Shaw had given them on the slick, that poison is in his drink. And what they've decided to do is that if the poison kills him, they're gonna make sure he stays at the back of the resurrection protocols forever. Emma even makes a point to say that she would sooner bring back her younger sister Cordelia, who some of you may or may not remember Cordelia Frost, a character who I think the last time she appeared in a comic was Dark Reign the Cabal #1 back in 2009, so roughly over 10 years ago. A character who, for all intents and purposes, isn't like the X-iest of X-Men villains, considering that her actions in the pages of Generation X way back in 1995 kicked off a rather unfortunate series of events that, honestly, I don't think Cordelia will ever live down. Some of you may or may not remember her actions trying to join the Hellfire Club directly affected and impacted the Generation X character Mondo. That aside, what happens if he survives said poison? Well, if he survives said poison, well, his body will be broken. He will no longer be able to support himself in any way, shape, form, or fashion. He'll basically be just shy of a vegetable. And that they will force him to live in that body, to live being broken and having to rely on the help and care of others until not just the time that Kate decides, but also that when Aurora and Emma agree as well that he can now be healed and put through resurrection. Now, one of the things I was kind of hoping would be addressed in this issue, but is not, is the fact that there are still Quiet Council seats that are open, and before we actually can get an answer to anything regarding that in any meaningful fashion, this is about roughly the point when Kate and Emma and Aurora arrive with a Sebastian Shaw who's looking more than a little jaundiced and is also at the same time being wheeled around in one of Charles's old wheelchairs that that he used to use back when he couldn't walk. They didn't even give him the floaty hover chair one from like back in the 90s. No, they said, no. You get the regular, degular, schmegular wheelchair. We're not putting anything special out there for you. We don't want you to be too comfortable. Now, as it stands, everyone does have questions about what is going on with Sebastian Shaw. And it's one of those situations where everyone in the room is basically having to put it to a vote because Magneto does actually want to know what they did to him because he can tell something happened. And neither Emma nor Kate or Aurora want to talk about it. And when it is put to a vote, the vote is deadlocked. I do love the fact that when you look at each of the characters' faces as they render their votes, Xavier kind of looks like a stern, concerned father, while Magneto knows what happened, but he wants to hear them say it. You can tell it's one of those situations where, like, if you've ever done something wrong and your parents ask you what you did, and they already know the answer, but they kind of want you to just go ahead and say it. That's the look Xavier has. Whereas with Magneto, his look almost kind of reminds me of like those times when you did do something wrong, or maybe you did something that was maybe potentially bad, but your parents aren't necessarily mad at you. They're actually kind of proud that you did this one thing. Like, let's say for argument's sake, you got into a fight at school, you think your parents are going to be mad at you, but they're actually proud of you for defending yourself, but they don't want to necessarily come out and say that they're proud of you because they don't want to encourage you to just, willy-nilly get into fights, but at the same time, they want to admit that they're proud of you. And then, of course, we got, Sinister's messy ass wanting to know, and of course, Exodus, who could not be bothered, but does actually have some concern. I appreciate that Mystique, though you can tell she actually doesn't give a shit because it happened to Sebastian Shaw, who she doesn't give a flying flip about. Kurt is probably the most confused of anyone at the table, and he isn't even sure if he wants to know, but he says yes anyway. But of course, Storm, Emma, and Kate all say no, and Sebastian, unsurprisingly, says no as well. Now, what is going to happen next from here, we don't really know, because he does give a rather ominous reply after the vote has been deadlocked. The fact that he says, yeah, I have been harmed, I have been hurt, I am broken now, but that doesn't mean I can't still cause problems. Now, whether or not this is him being in defiance of Emma or Kate, or maybe there is something going on that, maybe they have, gotten to him in some way that they have, maybe spurred him into acting in their best interest as opposed to his own. But you gotta remember, this is Sebastian Shaw. The guy, for as much as he is a Weasley sumbitch, you gotta kind of give him credit. The guy literally used to run the Hellfire Club for years, for decades. He didn't become the leader of the Hellfire Club over nothing. The guy is actually really smart. He's actually quite clever, and he's very capable when it comes to scheming and plotting, and he's not afraid of a fight. I actually don't think this is over, and part of me kind of wishes that Kate and Emma would not give him this second chance. This is one of those situations where I feel like the good guys in this situation are maybe putting a little bit too little respect on the name of the person that they're diametrically opposed to. But that said, I'm happy to see that at least something has finally been addressed here. But I'm gonna go tell you right now, this is far from finished. This is far from finished. Kate and Emma and Sebastian Shaw, and you can even throw in Storm and Lockheed into this. This ain't done by a damn sight. That said, you guys let me know what you think about the deal that Kate, Emma, and Aurora have put together in regards to Sebastian Shaw. Do you think Sebastian Shaw got off too light? Do you think Sebastian Shaw is gonna come back with a vengeance? Do you think that maybe he's already kind of planned for just such this scenario? And more importantly, do you think he will eventually wind up in the hole and become Sabretooth's pillow? Wash your damn hands and sound off in the comments. So hey, you made it to the end of the video. Awesome for you. If you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I don't see how you didn't, do me a favor. Hulk smash that like button. And if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you click subscribe so you can become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers, and tap that bell so you know when I post up. Also, feel free to go check out my Patreon, where if you chuck in a buck, you can get early access to most of my videos up to a week early. And if you have time, make sure you swing by nerd901.com, where you can find more of my content as well as other amazing stuff. Anyways, until next time, I love you 3000 plus ultra!